Hello, and welcome back to another Pen Talk. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for following me as I explore the amazing, diverse, and to me, extremely interesting wide world of pens. You see before you 15 pens that I recently cleaned out. Unfortunately, this is 1/10 of the pens I have in use, inked up, or ready to be cleaned out. So we're going to look at these pens individually and discuss the things that I've learned about these particular models during my cleaning process. We're going to look at each one individually, so stay tuned. I may not have thought this out as well as I would have liked to, but here's this amazing Dragon pen from Jinhao that I really enjoyed. I just didn't write with it enough to keep it inked up. Yes, I took it all apart, and this is when I clean a pen, I want to take the feed out, the nib, I want to clean everything. And this had a problem because this sleeve for the nib unit is glued in, so I can't extract it. And ink gets between this metal section and that plastic sleeve. So I had to soak it for a couple days and pull out the ink. So here's a great green acrylic pen that I enjoyed but just didn't write with enough. I couldn't pull the nib and feed out, but I flushed it with my bulb syringe, so I'm very comfortable. Got all the ink out of the converter. So this is ready to be reassembled and placed in a drawer. So here's a Moonman M700, which I probably should have written with more, but I didn't. I think it's a excellent design. I love the stripes. Comes with a Bach nib, so it was a little bit on the expensive side. I didn't unscrew the nib collar. Probably should have, but I didn't. But I didn't find any ink between there, so it seats well in the section. So this may be inked up again, and I might consider a different nib the next time I ink it up. So I had two of these 516 metal pens, and it was a pain in the ass to get the ink out of this feed and nib. I wasn't able to pull out the nib and feed or unscrew it, so it just took a lot of flushing. You know, the converter cleaned up well. So I have two of these, and both of them I just didn't write with them enough to warrant them being re-inked. So here's my Osprey Scholar, and that spring, as you can see, stays up at the top of the converter no matter what I tried to do. I couldn't pull the converter apart to get rid of that spring. Took a lot of effort to get that all cleaned out of ink, but eventually I succeeded. The nib and feed have fallen on the floor, but you know, it was a little bit of a challenge to clean it up. Had to unscrew that converter, which wasn't the easiest thing. When I reassemble it, I'm going to use some silicone grease on those threads, so next time it's easier to take it apart. The Osprey Scholar does have a nib assembly. It was easy to unscrew, and once I do that, I'm able to put my syringe on here and flush it very well and be happy with the cleanliness that I end up with. And it's a really nice nib. I've enjoyed the Osprey nibs. So here's a Wingsung 618, one of my first ones, and this was inked up and used quite a bit. But I forgot kind of like how to fill it, so I didn't pop off the blind cap before I started using it, and I ended up cracking the top of the barrel. I'm just going to probably put this one away. I have a lot of 618s that I really enjoy writing with. Those nibs are very consistent. I'll put this one away, and maybe at some future date I'll consider what I need to do to put it back in working order. Here's that Indian pen that I got from a viewer, Benu. What makes this easier to clean out was the nib unit was able to be unscrewed, so that gave me a clear path into the section where the piston rides up and down. So I didn't need to just use the piston up and down to try to flush water through it, a bulb syringe on the nib assembly, and then use a regular syringe just to flush this out. And I'm very happy with how it cleaned up. I wish all piston fill pens were as easy to clean up. Here's my Osprey Madison. Nice ebonite feed, which I just dropped. You know, your classic cutout a la Noodler's Flex Nib. Worked fairly well. I really did like this resin that they used. I think it's all injection molded. You know, the Osprey pens have a screw-on converter, which didn't work as well as I'd hoped it to work. So unfortunately, this will be relegated to the drawer. So here's a Jinhao 991 that I inked up with Blue Upon the Plains of Abraham. I think that's the Canadian ink that Noodler's made that is permanent. I was doing a lot of political postcards a few years ago, so I inked this up with that ink because I felt it would work well, and I used a hooded nib because it just laid down a nice consistent line. As you can see, there was some staining, but this is a $1 pen. I'm impressed with how well it works. If you would like to get an everyday writer for a couple bucks, I firmly recommend it. So here's my first vac filler of the group, the Wingsung 699 in this very nice transparent brown. I was able to pull the nib and feed. The section's easy to unscrew. So flushing this was a pretty intense effort, but I was able to get it done. And I'm very happy with how it cleaned up. I like the piston fill version of this pen better. Here's a 320 Montblanc that I inked up during my Montblanc video. I mean, I think it's an excellent pen. It's a nice nib. It's just not one that I wrote with as much as I should. It was relatively easy to clean out. I think this whole section can unscrew, but I didn't want to do that because it is put together fairly well right now, and I don't trust my ability of reassembling it correctly. Here's a Pen BBS 268, which is their lower end vac filler. I just didn't write with it enough, but when I was cleaning it out, I noticed that the section here has cracks in it. You can see that ink in the cracks. So I'm not going to be re-inking this pen, but it did disassemble, and I appreciate how Pen BBS allows you to disassemble their pens. This is a one-piece a la some of the Twisbys, etc., that do that, and I think injection molded, and there can be stresses in injection molded plastic that appear over time, and I think this is one example of that. Here's the only vintage in the group. You know, it's a lever sack fill shafer, and I flushed it as much as I could by using the lever to force water in and out of the nib and feed. I just didn't write with this pen as much as I had expected to. It's that transition model, which I've seen more now on the internet than I ever saw before I bought this pen, but I thought it was a great eBay buy. I'm very happy with it to add to my many shafer balances in my collection. Great, nice, big gold nib. All of these balances that I have are great writers. So I'm going to give you a minute or two, well, a few seconds, to recognize this pen. It's a fine writing golden armor, and I had it inked up as an eyedropper, so this barrel was full of ink, and it was Robert Oster Gold Antigua, and it did stain and corrode the brass in this section. You know, in my feeling that O-ring should always be above the threads rather than below the threads as there is in this design. This pen just never succeeded as much as I would like it to. You know, it looks great. I got a nice broad nib, but it is now going to be put together. I'll silicone grease a lot of bits, and I'll consider whether at some point in time to re-ink it. So that's my exploration of these pens, which I've disassembled as much as I could and cleaned them as well as I could. And I don't plan to re-ink any of these. Hopefully you've enjoyed this little overview of pens that you may remember from previous videos. And this may not be the optimal setup to present these, but it's the best I could do currently. So I hope this video finds you safe, healthy, and happy. And part of owning a fountain pen is cleaning it out. So if you're going to enjoy fountain pens, enjoy cleaning them out. And unfortunately, as you saw, some of these have not survived the test of time. But that's to be expected. Not everything survives forever. But I have a few other pens that I am very much happy with. So a few of these getting out of circulation is not something I have any concern about. So I've reached the end of this video. Hope you found it interesting, educational, entertaining. We're going to say bye now. More to come. Stay tuned.